Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. We have a new video for you today, and thank you to those who have been making helpful suggestions. They help a lot. Increase the font size. You can do this. Hey dummy, try that. No, everybody's been very polite. If you see something I'm doing that's really annoying you and you know a better way to do it, please feel free to reach out and let me know. It's much appreciated. But today we're going to use the BLoC pattern again in conjunction with the provider package, because I love the way that worked out last time. I think it makes setting up a block much easier. This time we're going to throw shared preferences in the mix so that when we are done with our state and we destroy it, those values will be offloaded to shared preferences, and the next time the app is booted up, shared preferences will pass that back to the active block and we'll go off like nothing happened. So it's going to be a theme switcher, and I know there are packages out there and other tutorials that show you how to do that. It just worked out to be a really good way to make changes to the block and to instantly see them on your screen. So we'll set up a switch that will go from light mode to dark mode, and then we will have a slider that will change the primary color of the app as we go. We'll create a custom color object so that the labels will be meaningful to us, the colors will be meaningful to Flutter, and we'll have an index that we can then pass back to shared preferences. That's the objective for today. I'm gonna get off this log in the middle of the lake, round up my dogs, get in the truck, go home, and we'll get to work. All right, I have created a brand new project called BLoC_preference, and we're gonna go into the main.dart file, and we're gonna do what we do at the beginning of most projects, which is get rid of a lot of the demo apps. So this big block green, let's get rid of that. And then everything here from class, my home page down, we can get rid of that as well. We'll have an error there for the home for a little bit. We'll just let that lie for now. That's fine. I'd like to go to pub.dev and bring in our packages that we'll need for starters. And so if we go to pub.dev, we need 3 packages. We need the provider package, we need RXDart, and we'll need shared preferences. So let's start with the latter. So we'll search shared preferences. We will go to installing, grab this right here. And stick it right here after Cupertino icons. And now we'll go back for provider. It's there. I like what they're doing with pub.dev, where they're giving it this score and also this new Flutter favorite. You know, when you get something off NPM, you don't necessarily know whether it's somebody's hobby or not. It's nice to kind of have these stamped with endorsed with this badge here, so you kind of know it's a stable package. Grab provider, bring it in here. And then lastly, we want RXDart. Right there, again, also a 100, also a Flutter favorite. So we're on solid ground. Good. All right, so the way I'd like to tackle this is to build the shell of the application first. So we have 2 pages. We have a home page and we have a settings page that we want to build. So let's build those first, and then we can worry about wiring up our state. So in our lib folder, let's build a new folder called widgets. I'm going to go lowercase on that just to be consistent. And we'll have home.dart, and then we will also have settings.dart. And so flipping back to the home.dart, let's do a class of home, which is going to extend a stateless widget. Just going to work with stateless widgets in this project. That has a required method of build, which we can use the code complete to do for us. So there's that. So let's add a scaffold. Let's give it an app bar. of an app bar widget. Let's give it a title, which will be a text widget that says home. And I will code format that. I will save that, and we will leave that for now and flip over to settings. And this is going to be a class of settings. Also going to extend a stateless widget. Also going to have a build method. Also going to have a scaffold with an app bar. And that app bar is going to have a title. That'll be a text widget, and it will say settings. And I'm going to code format. There we go. All right, there's the 2 pages under construction. So at this point, I'm going to go back to the main widget. I am going to take out this my home page and the title of that whole line, except the comma, and I'm going to put the home page here. I'm going to need to import home, which I will use the auto import to do. And that kills our error. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the emulator started. And that will take a little while to start up. So while we wait for that, I'm going to go back to the home.dart widget. And we have given it an app bar. I want to give it a body. And, oops, body, right. And body's going to be a center. And in the center is going to have a child. And that is going to be a raised button. That raised button will have a child, which will be a text widget that says settings. So this will be a button that we push to go to the settings page. We will have an onPress method. I'm gonna code format, just give myself a little space here. An onPress method, and all we want to do here is navigate to our settings page. So that is navigator of context dot push. We want to push a material page route. And that will have a builder, which will have a context, which we will set off to settings, capital. Right, and we need to import settings like so. I'm going to code format that, give that a save, and that should be all set. Pass on that. Let's go ahead and just refresh that. There we go. Get our button. Got the settings button. It takes us to settings. We can bounce back. Very good. All right, so our home page is all set. Let's go to settings under our widget folder again. And I'll bring this up on the screen as well. So this is what we've got here. And so what I want to create is 2 rows. One will set the dark mode. It will have a switch. And the second row will have a slider that allows us to set the primary color of the application. So our scaffold needs to have a body. And we'll put a center widget there. We'll put a child of list view. List view will have children. And we will put a row there. The row will have children. And so we want is the label to the left, and the this row will need to switch to the right. So let's do a text widget. And let's have that text widget say dark mode. And then the switch. And to get ourselves going with the switch, we'll need a couple of values. So we'll need a value. We're just going to mock this up for now. So this is a true false. And so for now, let's just say false. We'll circle back and put a dynamic value in there. And it's going to need an unchanged method. And it's going to need to get a Boolean here. So we'll call that our Boolean value. And we can leave that blank for now. We can hit save. We see our label. We see our switch. We would like to put some space between them. So let's come back up. Let's put children there. Let's come up above children and let's do main axis alignment. Main axis alignment. Space between, which should put all the space in between the two widgets and push them to the end. Which it does. It pushes them a little too far to the end for me. So I'm going to come up to this row. I'm going to wrap it with padding. And I think this is fairly new to the Flutter plugin where it actually fills in a default value for you. I'm going to change the dot all to symmetric. And I'm just going to have, I'm not too worried about the top and the bottom. So I just want space around the right and the left side of the device. So let's do 15 units of padding on either side. And yep, that looks pretty good to me. And so let's do another row with a slider. So just to save ourselves a little bit of time, let's go ahead and add a comment after this padding. Copy the whole thing. And just paste it down here as a second row. And let's just change the values here. So for dark mode, we want the label to read primary color. And there's that. And we don't want a switch. We want a slider. Okay, and the slider is going to have a value that is actually a double. So let's give it, just to get started, a value of 0.0. The unchanged is also going to be a double. We'll save that. There we go. And there's actually no points on the slider. So we're going to want 4 colors to choose between. So we want to have 4 points in here. So let's say we're going to have a minimum value. Not there. A minimum value of 0.0. A max value of 3.0. So that'll be points at 0.0, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, which is 4 points. And that will give us 3 divisions. So if you save that, see how that's looking. So I see, the beginning point, 2, 3, 4. That's exactly what we want. Let's give it a label of color for now. Okay. That should be good. Now, when somebody comes in here and sets the settings, we do need some way to trigger a save back to our state will be, our block will get the changes instantly, but we're going to build in shared preferences so that we save the settings to our device and can get them when the application starts up. So we need some trigger to tell the device that we want it to save the setting. So we might be tempted to hook that to our unchanged right here, but this value is going to change an awful lot. I mean, most people are going to slide through, see what all the values are. And also, if you actually track this once it starts to slide, it is recording point changes all along here. I mean, it is insane how many point changes it captures here. So we wouldn't want to be flipping back and forth to shared preferences or a database that many times. So we need some kind of a trigger. Save buttons on settings are really kind of becoming outmoded. And so what I want to do is I want to use this button here. So when somebody goes into settings, they change the settings and they leave. At that point, I want to tell the device they're leaving. Everything they've set up in settings, go ahead and save that to the device. So I'm going to replace this, because this doesn't do us anything. It's just automatically generated. So we will, up here at the top, where we have a title, I'm going to put a leading widget, and we're going to put an icon. Now, if you are on Android, you want to go arrow back, and if I save that, I'll get an arrow right here. Looks exactly like it should on an Android device. I am actually on an iOS simulator right now, so I'm going to use Cupertino icons, and which I need to import, and I want to use the back arrow. There we go. That looks just like it did before, except it doesn't work anymore. So let's wrap that in a gesture detector. And so the icon is our child, and then we can do an on-tap method, which will be navigator of context.pop. And so that'll pop it. So if I save that, our functionality, I can put Dart math in here, what I did. Our functionality will be returned right there. But this is also where I want to save my settings. So I'm just going to put a to-do here, save settings. And so everything on these two widgets should be in place once we have state to make this operational, including a hook to grab onto to save those settings when we're done setting them. And so let's flip over now and focus on creating state for this application. And so let's do that with a BLoC. I'm going to have you so in the lib folder, let's do a new folder called blocks. And we are going to put exactly one block in that folder. And it's going to be preference underscore block.dart. And that will be a class of preference block. And so let's think about what we're going to need for our state. So we're going to need a couple of streams here. We're going to need one for the brightness of the application, so whether it's in light mode or dark mode, and we're going to need to set the primary color. So looks like we'll need really two streams to work off of, and they are going to feed into this main.dart. This is where the values will be sent to. We will use the settings page to input them into the stream, and we will get them back here in the main.dart file. And actually, while we're in the main.dart file, sorry to hop around here, main.dart, let's replace primary swatch with primary color, and let's just keep it blue. Colors.blue, not black, blue. And also, let's do a set of brightness here. This is the default, but let's just set brightness.light. So we're going to replace these eventually with the output of our stream. All right, so one of those streams will go right to here, which will be our brightness. So we definitely want a brightness stream. So let's do final brightness. And that will be a behavior subject. So we'll set that equal to a behavior subject, which is a specific type of stream with RXDart. And we can give it a type, and we will give it brightness. We can just give it that enum that Flutter will use to read the brightness directly from that stream. Now, we're also going to need a primary color stream. And so this will be a behavior subject as well, but of what type? If we think about what we need and what we are going to be feeding into this stream, we're going to have a slider. We're going to slide along here, and that slider is going to land on a double value. We have a label here which just says color. We'd like to be able to display the actual color name of the color as we slide to it. And then in the end, we're going to be passing a color class to the material app. And so that really sounds like we'd be better to create our own object that we could pick and choose the pieces of or the properties that we need out of that object, depending on who's getting it, whether it's the human eyes to read it here, whether it's the double for the slider, or whether it's the color class for Flutter. So let's create our own object to put in these brackets here. So let's come out to the lib folder, create a new folder, and we'll call it models. And in the models folder, a new file called color.dart. And inside of that, we will create class color model, because we want to distinguish this from the Dart color class. And I'm going to give this 3 properties. So we'll give it a final double index, a final color, which I need to import, color, and a final string name. So what this does for us, the double will be our index, and this is what will interact with the slider. Normally indexes are integers, but they don't have to be. A double will work perfectly with our slider, so we're going to call that a double. This color class will be what Flutter is going to use in the main.dart to set the primary color. And then the string, where I just have color here on the slider, the string can be a human-friendly name that we can attach to the label. So that'll work great for us. Let's just complete this model by creating a constructor. We'll create a name constructor. We'll do this dot index, this dot color, and this dot name. And we're done. So if we come back to our preference block here, we can now put our color model in here. And we do need to import it like that. So those will be our streams. We are also going to need to have some colors to pick from. So let's create those here as well. So let's have an array of colors. And let's set that to, I'm going to add my semicolon here just to satisfy that. So we want an array of these color model objects that we just created. So let's create one. Let's create, so the color will be color.blue, colors.blue. Next we have, you can always hit control space if you forget the properties that you have available to you. So index, we'll make the index for this one 0.0. And then lastly the name, which we will call blue. And so I'm going to copy that and paste 3 more rows. And so we had colors blue. Let's do this one will be green. It'll have an index of 1.0 and a label or a name of green. Let's make this red. Index of 2.0. And this will be, let's go white. Index of 3.0, and then let's change the label to white. Okay. Got those. Let's go ahead and set up getters, setters. So let's do getters here. We want to be able to get the brightness, obviously. So let's we'll have a stream of type brightness. We'll do a getter. It'll be lowercase, whoop, as I type uppercase, lowercase brightness, which will get us our brightness stream. So these streams are private because we want to control access, and we've got these public getters that allow us to access them from outside the block. Another stream of our color model, which is a getter, which will be primary color. And that's going to go to our primary color stream. And let's give ourselves some setters. A function that gets brightness. So we'll call that change brightness. So this will give us a way to feed the stream, which will go to brightness.sync.add. And another one that takes a color model, and that is our change primary color. Now we don't need any getters or setters for our colors. We're just going to use that internally. And so to be able to do that, we would like a helper function. So when we slide, if we think forward to when we have this slider activated, when we slide, it is going to drop on a number, 0.0123. Then we're going to want to set in the block the primary color here. And we can see we've got this setter. It takes in a color model object. So we're going to need to convert the double index into a color model at one point. So let's build ourselves a function in this block to be able to do that. So let's call it index to primary color. And that'll take in a double. And it will return colors.firstWhere. I'm going to give this just an x variable where x goes to x.index equals the index that we feed it here. And so hope that's clear what that does. We give it an index. It pulls the color with that index. So we might give it 2 here because it landed here on the slider. This function will go, okay, this is the color model that has the index of 2, and we'll get this color back, which we can then pump into our stream using change primary color. Now, also thinking ahead, we want to use shared preferences to store these values. So we are feeding the block, feeding the stream. We are pulling from that. But at some point, we want to be able to flip the values in the stream to our shared preferences on our device, and then make that pass back when the application is started up again. So it goes to shared preferences, the block is started up, and shared preferences feeds the stream inside the block, and everything just starts up as if the state was never lost. So we're going to need a function to save our preferences, and we're going to need a function to load our preferences. So let's do that here in our block. This is our business logic, and so this all belongs in the block. So let's start with save preferences. When we leave this, we put a placeholder in the settings for when this button is clicked to get out of settings. We want to save there, but we left ourselves some time to actually build that function with just a to-do block. So let's do save preferences. Start with a lowercase. And this is going to be an async function because shared preferences is an async operation. So we want an instance of shared preferences. So we bring it in, we give it a name, and it equals await shared preferences dot get instance. And so this is now our shared preference object. So shared preferences uses primitive values. So in terms of our first one here, dark mode, we have an enum, which is brightness, light, dark. We can't save an enum to shared preferences, but we can save a Boolean, which would be easily mapped to this light or dark brightness property. So let's say if brightness.value equals brightness.light, let's go ahead and set our shared preferences. So we await prefs.set. These are our options. Boolean is what we're going to want to use. And we give it a key and a value. So this is very similar to the way that the internal storage works on the web. So the key would be dark. And false. And if the brightness is not light, so it's dark, we want an else, and we want to set prefs.set Boolean to same key, but true. So it is dark mode. And the color, primary color, is easier. We just wait prefs set. We got our options here. We can't set our color model object. I think you can do it if you get creative with the conversion of Dart into a JSON string, a JSON object, and then back to a Dart object. But why do that to ourselves? We can set a double. That double can be our index, and we can use that to get the color from up here. So we'll store the index. So the key will be color index. And the value will be primary color dot value dot index. So we can get the value of the stream up here if we're inside the block, which we are. So this will save our preferences to shared preferences. What if we want to get them out? So we'll need another function for that. So let's do load preferences. And this will also be an async. And we want an instance of shared preferences. So I'm just going to copy this line down here. So we will search our device for this key, and if we get a value, then we will use it, but we might not get a value. So, for instance, the first time we run this is going to be null. So we need to be aware of that. So in our brightness, let's get our values. So let's get Boolean dark mode is going to equal prefs.get. And we just give it the key. Let's get our color index, which is going to be equal to prefs.get color index. So if there are no values here with this key, these are going to be null. So on dark mode, let's say if dark mode does not equal null, so it has a value. In that case, what we want to do is evaluate this, and let's say dark mode equals false. In that case, we will set change brightness to brightness, capital, dot light. Else, change brightness to brightness dot dark. So if we look at that, we have a value in our shared preferences. It says, is it dark mode? And if we get false, then that means it's light. So we want to put in our stream brightness light. Otherwise, we want to put in our stream brightness dark. Now, what if we get no value at all? So here, if we didn't get null, we're either going bright or light. If we didn't get anything, then let's just say change brightness to brightness light. So that's our default value. If we have nothing in shared preferences, go ahead and just make it light to begin with. And now let's do the same thing for the primary color. So if the color index does not equal null, so we have a value in shared preferences, then we want to change the primary color. And we're going to get an index right here. So let's use our little helper method here. Index to primary color can be color index. And so you see we get an index out of shared preferences. We pass it to this little helper method. It converts it to the full color model, which it then puts into the stream. Now, if we have no value, so this is the first time that this ever fires up, we will change the primary color. We need a color model here, so let's just come up to here. Let's copy blue, and let's give it that. So the first time this fires up, if there's nothing or the storage has been wiped out, if there's nothing there, it's going to default to blue. Otherwise, it's going to find something. It'll give it the index, we'll get the color model, and we'll put that in the stream. Okay, now to get rid of these blue lines here, we do need a dispose method. So let's just dispose our streams. Primary color.close and brightness.close. And it's just a warning, but it's nice to get rid of those blue lines. So that satisfies that condition right there. All right, that is pretty good business logic there in our block. We've got our streams that we need. We've got an array here, which is private, which we can refer to. Getters, setters, a nice little helper function for the index. We've got the ability to save preferences. We've got the ability to load preferences out of our device storage. And we're satisfying that, that warning by disposing the streams right there. So this is our block. This is our state. Now we need a way to inject this state into the application, and this is where the provider package is going to come in. So let's create a new folder in lib called providers. Providers will have the theme going here with just one item in it. It's nice to keep these things organized, right? So we'll have the folders so that if this was a larger app, we could continue to build it and it would make sense. But here it's probably overkill, one item in every folder. But we will call it preference underscore provider .dart. And not a whole lot in here. I mean, you can use the provider package for maintaining your state, but in this case, we're just going to use it for dependency injection. And so we will call it class preference provider. Maybe. There we go. And we are going to use a mixin. So we will use the mixin change notifier. And this change notifier is a mix-in from the provider package that gives us all the functionality we need to inject the block, to wrap it, and to serve or to allow any widget below the wrap, which we'll get to go ahead and access that instance of the block. So this is going to have one variable. It's going to be a preference block with underscore block. And we're going to build a constructor. So the constructor, when this provider is created, it is going to create an instance of the block that we will then access, and we will just have one instance of the block, which is kind of the point of state. You don't want multiple states out there. You want one state. So we'll create a constructor of preference provider. Preference provider. That's a very hard word to type. Lots of E's. All right. And that will fire up an instance of preference BLoC. Now, when we load the BLoC, this would be a great time to load our preferences from our BLoC right here. I mean, we got to think about it. At some point, we have to dip into our shared preferences and pull this out. If the provider is getting created, that means that everything is getting rebooted and restarted. So this is a perfect place to reach into that BLoC that we just created right here and say, you know what, at this point, go ahead and load the preferences. Since you're building everything from scratch, reach into the device storage, get me my key values, load them to that BLoC. We create it, we load the streams all in one step. All right, and then lastly, I want to create a way to get the BLoC. This is a private BLoC variable. We don't want people reaching in here and accessing that instance without our knowledge. So we will create preference BLoC, a getter. We'll call it BLoC, and it will return an instance of our private variable right there. That is our provider. In order to be able to get our provider, we need to wrap a point in our application that is above everything that we would want to access it for in the widget tree. So basically any widget below it in the tree, wherever we wrap it, we'll be able to subscribe to, or be able to get that provider and then subscribe to streams in the BLoC, but only if that wrap is higher than the widget. All right. So let's come back here to main.dart. And we are actually going to want to stream to the material app. So we're really high. Our usage is very, very high in the widget tree. In fact, so high that we're going to need to call on a special function of the provider package to get to it for here in the material app. But for now, let's just go ahead and we'll get to that. Let's go ahead and wrap the material app with a change notifier. So wrap with widget, and let's change notifier provider. And we need to bring that import in. That comes from the provider package. Okay, that wraps it. It has a required create. And so that takes a build context, and it goes to the preference provider. I'm going to need to bring that in. I'm going to code format a little bit. There we go. All right, so we have now wrapped the material app with our provider, which means anything inside the material app can get the provider. So let's go to our settings page and take advantage of that. Up here in our build method, we can now bring in that BLoC. So let's do that through our provider. So we're going to create a final BLoC variable, and this is provider dot, which I have to bring in, import, provider of context. It is a generic, so if you come after of and you do these brackets here, you can give it the type of provider, and this is our preference provider, which we will need to import. And sometimes it doesn't like to auto import there. So let's just manually bring it in. Providers, preference provider .dart. There we go. And then in our provider, we have the BLoC right here. and we need a semicolon at the end. So what we've done is we've used our provider to search out and get the instance of our BLoC in the widget tree and it gives us this right here. It gives us this BLoC that we can then work with throughout the settings widget. And we can work with it right here. So we see we have this to-do save settings. We had set this for ourselves all along. Now that we have the BLoC, we have built our saves preference function, and we can call it right there. So when people leave, they hit this button, it calls BLoC.save preferences. It goes to our preference block, runs this function, puts everything in shared preferences, and we are all set there. So that's good. So back in our settings widget here. Now we would like to be able to get the existing value of the BLoC for this switch, for this slider. When we change these, we want to then feed back to the BLoC and into that stream. And so to do that, we can come down here. Let's start with our switch. Why don't we go ahead and wrap this with a stream builder. So it's a stream builder. It's a generic, so let's give it a type. We're going to give it type brightness because that's what we're going to be pulling in. Our stream, we can go into our BLoC, and the one that makes sense is brightness here. So we're going to be feeding this value into our switch. The value is going to be, we just hard-coded false for something to look at, but we want the snapshot.data. But we are going to be getting an enum out of there, so let's convert it to a Boolean. So let's come here. We've got this on its own line here. So let's say if snapshot, I'm going to wrap this like this. Get the comma out of there. Snapshot.data equals brightness.light. In that case, I want the value to be false, and otherwise I want it to be true, and then I need a comma at the end. So if the stream is feeding us brightness light, we want this switch to be just like that, false. And then if it's brightness dark, we want it flipped because the question here is dark mode, and this is dark mode off, and then true would be over here, which would be dark mode on. On change, we're going to get a Boolean value. And so if value equals true, and I can just say if value, then we want to feed the BLoC. We want to call the change brightness. We want to add the stream value, brightness.dark, else BLoC.change brightness, brightness.light. So if this is true, in other words, if it's flipped over here, then we want to call our BLoC and put brightness.dark into our change brightness stream. And if it's not, we want to do the opposite, right? If it's over here, it's false. We want brightness light. If we save that, that should give us the ability to flip the switch. So there we go. We want to do the same thing to the primary color. We haven't hooked it up to the material app yet, so we're not seeing changes on the screen, but we at least have the ability to feed the stream. And if we come out of here, well, let's stay in here for now. Let's wait to leave until we've set this up. So let's do the same thing for the primary color. So let's come down to the slider and let's wrap that in a stream builder. And this will be a color model, which we need to import. Our stream will be BLoC primary color. That gives us a snapshot, which will be an async color model. So let's change our value then to snapshot.data.index. Then let's come down to our label and do snapshot.data.name. So this is exactly why we set up our own model, because we wanted to be able to have an index to feed and interact with the slider, and we wanted to be able to have a string name here to feed the label. And then when the value is changed, we want to change the primary color. So we will BLoC.change primary color. We have an index or a number or double coming from our slider. We need to feed this a primary color, and we have exactly the function for that. In our BLoC, we created this nice little index to primary color function, and we can feed that our value, give it a semicolon at the end, and this will convert the index to a primary color, throw it into the stream, and there we go. So if we save that, we should then be able to move the slider. So I'm going to slide it to red, I'm going to slide it to dark mode, and I'm going to leave. Now, in theory, we just saved our preferences here when we left, but we're not able to see those yet because we haven't yet fed the stream to the material app. So let's do that, and that'll be our last step. So if we go to main.dart, we want to replace these hard-coded primary color and brightness values with our stream. And so we could just come up here and do final BLoC equals provider.of context and get our preference provider, and then grab the BLoC. And we can see that that will fail. And the reason that fails is we are calling the BLoC and calling the provider above where we have wrapped. Now, we need to get below the change notifier provider, and there is absolutely no space for us to bring this down. If we do, say down here, we're in the widgets already, so this is not a space where we can be putting this kind of logic. So this is a problem. We are basically parallel with the level in the tree that we want to be able to pull the stream from. And fortunately, in the provider package, there is a solution for this called consumer. So rather than this syntax here, we're going to use a different way to call the provider. And what I'm going to do is just kind of bump this material app out of the way for a minute. And I'm going to replace the child. Rather than feed it the material app, I'm going to intercede here with a consumer. And I believe we'll have to import that. Consumer of type preference provider. That is going to need, it's going to need the parentheses. It's going to need a builder. And that builder is going to need three things. It's going to need a context. This is very much like a callback, so you're really just naming the variables. It's going to need, secondly, the item that's being consumed. And this is a preference provider, which is why we have this. We filled in the generic with preference provider. So I'm going to call it provider. And then it's also going to need a child. And you can just feed a child. Okay, then we need the curly braces. And so our material app needs to be inside of that. So I am just going to find where the material app ends. I'm going to cut it and I'm going to put it inside of the curly braces, and I'm probably going to end up with some semicolon cleanup. All right, now I'm going to code format because that's a mess. And I need to add a return statement. That's what that message is telling me right there for the material app. So you see our error went away, which is good. This is an instance of our provider. We've basically created some space in here to allow us to do that. So this is our the instance of our provider right here. So to illustrate that, let's go ahead and wrap the material app with a stream builder. And let's go ahead and pull in our brightness. So we'll say of type brightness. So we need a stream. Ordinarily, we declared our BLoC variable, and we did BLoC.brightness over here in settings. Right there. Here, we have our provider object here. So then we need to go into the BLoC property, and then we can get our brightness. So it creates an extra little tier here because we brought in the provider, whereas in settings we went to, we went ahead and put the BLoC property right here, right to the variable. So that gives us a snapshot. I want to just, and I didn't do this in settings, and we'll go back and do it, but just if the snapshot doesn't have data yet, I do want to make sure that we don't get an error on that. So if not, so the exclamation in front there, snapshot dot has data, I would just want to return an empty container. So why don't we copy that line, go back to settings, find your stream builder right up here above the switch. Let's put that in there. And then also down here right up in top above the slider. Let's do the same thing there. And so now we can replace brightness.light with snapshot.data. And this is pulling, so we have our preferences already. This is pulling from the stream now and feeding our material app our brightness. So we also need to do that for the primary color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the material app again with a widget. I'm sorry, not a widget. Hope you didn't do that. I'm going to wrap it with a stream builder. There we go. And so now we're going to stream in our primary color. So let's stream in our color model. And we'll need to import that. The stream is going to be provider up here, dot BLoC dot primary color. And we have a snapshot again. We now have two properties called snapshot. So let's just distinguish this one by calling it snapshot primary color. And I'm going to take this same logic up here, that if the snapshot does not have data, and I'm going to put it right down here and above our material app, but I'm going to say snapshot primary color. That has data. So that way, if we don't get a value for whatever split second that is, it's basically just going to paint nothing on the screen, and then it will paint the material app, and it all happens so fast that nobody notices, and it just prevents an error from happening when there's no data. So we have colors.blue hard-coded. So let's do snapshot primary color, and this is a color model object. So for us here, we actually want data.color property, because we want to be able to feed it a class, a color class. I'm going to format that code Save it again, and we can see things have already changed red because that's what we had when we left our settings page. So now we come into our settings page, we can slide this around, we instantly see changes, and when we leave, come out here, we reset our state. So this is going to wipe out the block. The block will be quickly rebuilt. It will confer with your device, pull out those settings from shared preferences, load them right back into the block, and you have lost your state, but nothing happened. You have completely restored it on every restart of the application. So we can go dark mode and let's say green. We leave here, we restart the application state, and we are right back to dark mode green. So there you have it. We use 3 pretty great plugins for Flutter. We used Provider, we used RXDart, and we used shared preferences to create state and offload it to our device and then restore it seamlessly to the application on startup. So hope you found that helpful. If you did and you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe as you all have been doing. That's very much appreciated. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.